Hi everybody. I'd like to acknowledge the Noongar Bilbuman people from the Wajak Noongar country who are traditional custodians of the land that we meet on today, and acknowledge the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people, the continuing deep connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people to this land. I'd like to invite up to get started Josie Alec, who is the First Nations lead for the ACF, but also a traditional owner in the Murujuga region, and she's going to sing a song in language for us. Thanks, Josie.
Thanks, everyone. So firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to the Wajak Noongar Nation and the people here, and to their elders, their rising leaders, and all of the people and the future generations of all Aboriginal people in this country. I thought it'd just be fitting, firstly, to sing a song from my country, because it always makes me feel a bit better when we're doing something like this. It just sets a bit of the tone, and this is about the rivers and the sisters coming together to talk about protection of country, and their connection with country. So if you want to clap, you can. So. Nandari bangari na wunduwala, babu nuwangai wunduwala, kwai kanangari ma wunduwala, wunduwala wanganjari, kwai turuwa the kanangari ma, kwai kanangari ma, kanangari ma, kwai turuwa the kanangari ma, wunduwa baba nuwangai, wunduwala baba nuwangai, wunduwa baba nuwangai. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Josie. That was a really fantastic way to start. So my job is really to just introduce the amazing speakers that we've got tonight. But before I do that, I'd just like to talk about some of the Australia Institute research that we've done to put tonight's discussion into context. So I think everybody here knows that the gas industry is incredibly powerful in Western Australia, actually across Australia. So every year, a whole range of prominent Australian politicians from state and federal parliament go to the Australian Energy Producers, formerly APPEA conference, which is a big gas lobby conference, where they lavish praise on the gas industry and promise to do things for the gas industry. And they invariably over-deliver on those promises. Now, other industries, so that's real power. That's definitely power. They're very powerful, but they're powers of a particular kind, because other industries, say the manufacturing industry employs around 1 million people in Australia. That's something that Australia really needs. The iron ore industry pays about $10 billion in royalties to Western Australia, which is about a quarter of the Western Australian budget. That money would be hard to do without. But the gas industry is different, because it's a minuscule employer. It employs around 0.25% of the Australian workforce and about 0.7% of the Western Australian workforce. A tiny fraction of the jobs, around 1/20th of the jobs in the health sector, about 1/16th of public servants, a tiny percentage of education, jobs in education, etc. They also don't pay very much tax. In financial year 2020, 2021, if you paid more than $30 of income tax, you paid more tax than Chevron, Woodside, Shell, Exxon, Impex, Santos and APLNG paid on $59 billion of income that year. But the real kicker The real kicker is that they get most of the gas for free. Australia-wide, they get around a bit over half the gas that they export for free. The federal government doesn't levy royalties on them, and in Western Australia 73% of the gas exported is royalty free, meaning that the gas industry get the gas for free. So they have real power, but that power rests on constant spin. Okay, they have to maintain this illusion of providing huge amounts of jobs and paying taxes and keeping the economy going, and that requires a lot of PR, a lot of advertising, and revolving door politics that would make your head spin. Now, slightly out of order, but so what happens with Western Australia's gas? Well, 90% of Western Australia's gas is exported, and the largest use of gas outside gas being exported as liquefied natural gas is processing that gas for export. And that's 2.5 times the amount of gas Western Australians use for electricity production. You can see that's the exported gas, and that's the gas used for to process the LNG, and that's electricity generation down there. Those blue areas are the gas that's used in Western Australia. So the idea of a gas shortage is not very credible in Western Australia. So who are these companies? Well, huge amounts of gas are exported from Western Australia, but it's not exported by Western Australians. It's exported by a handful of predominantly foreign-owned companies, and it's important to note that they're foreign-owned. That's important because it means that big foreign multinational gas companies, so all the blue is foreign ownership, and we don't know about the orange because it's not transparent exactly who owns Woodside. But it's important because foreign entities now control all of our gas resources, and their interests aren't necessarily aligned with ours, and because all the profits, or a huge percentage of the profits, go overseas. The one thing they do really deliver on is emissions. So emissions from gas produced in Western Australia, including when it's burnt overseas, is equivalent to about a bit less than half of Australia's domestic emissions every year. So much larger than many, many countries around the world. And one single project, Woodside's proposed Burrup Hub mega project, would produce more emissions than all of Australia's coal power stations put together. So that's the Burrup Hub emissions, that's the individual emissions from Australian coal power stations. And that's before Australia's Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, at the moment. So so the final thing I'll mention is just that, the great thing about this is it's very easy to debunk with data. Right, so the gas industry's power is very, very strong, but it's kind of a house of cards because it rests on a whole lot of misinformation. We've got some fantastic speakers today. We've got Professor Fiona Stanley, who I'm sure you all know very well, who's a world-leading epidemiologist, an amazing champion for young people in Australia, and a fantastic spokesperson on climate and a whole range of social issues. We've got Josie Ellick, who is the First Nations lead for the Australian Conservation Foundation. She is also, she's also a Kuruma Mathodonera woman and one of the founders of Save Our Songlines, and it's fantastic to have her. We've got Alex Hillman, who used to work for Woodside as their climate advisor and is a and is currently the lead analyst at the Australian Centre for Corporate Responsibility, and we've got Executive Director of the Australia Institute, leading Australian economist and commentator, Richard Dennis. So I would like to, and I should say after that, hang around after that, because we've got a real treat. We've got Lucy Peach, who I'm sure you all know is going to sing some songs for us, which I'm really excited about, because it's great to have some more great music to relax after some pretty intense content. So thanks very much. I'd like to invite Fiona Stanley up to speak. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. I also would like to acknowledge that we're on Noongar Budja and acknowledge Josie Murujuga. I think I'm not an expert on what's happening up in Murujuga and the Burrup, but I'm anguished about it, and I just want to let you know I'm really looking forward to what you're going to say. When I acknowledge that we're on Noongar Budja and acknowledge the traditional owners, I always acknowledge the fact of forced removals of children and the damage that that has done, not just to that generation, but to every generation since. And the problems we see in Aboriginal communities now are not Aboriginal problems, they're problems of marginalisation and genocide. So I've got a few things to say in 5 minutes. The first is about COVID and how excited I was about COVID. Being an epidemiologist, of course, I was excited about COVID. But one of the reasons I was excited is not that I was into counting cases, but the science was so beautifully followed by politicians, by states, by territories. They really, often they had a scientist standing next to them when they're making an announcement about closing boundary borders and so on. So I thought, great, post-COVID, they're going to take notice of all the science that we've been pushing for all this time. How could they not? I mean, the science around climate change and the fact that fossil fuels have caused this huge change on the planet and the worrying things that are happening is actually more powerful than the COVID data. And we had to sort of fly blind a bit with the COVID stuff because we didn't have vaccine and all that sort of thing. And we had to look at all the changes in each of the mutations. So my anguish really as a scientist and as a grandmother and a mother and a citizen is that science has actually been ignored, and increasingly seems to me to be ignored, and people are sort of paying lip service to the fact that yes, we want to have renewables and that's the way to go, but really I am worried about the fact that there are certain corporates. I was pretty stunned by some of the things that you said, Mark, about this industry. But we've been doing research on child health and wellbeing now for 40 years. I'm very old, and there are more companies and corporates have an influence than our data, and they're the fossil fuel industry, the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, the fast food industry, the sugar industry, and increasingly the media industry. I want to make one comment about the people sort of giving out information, the climate scientists in particular, saying that we're trying to stop getting to a 1.5 increase, a centigrade increase in global temperature, and we're worried about going to 2 degrees. It's not, that's actually making it sound as though it's not very harmful. I don't like means. That's the mean. What I like is distributions. And what I would like to have shown you, except I didn't have any slides, is that the distribution which is causing that mean rise means a huge increase in the number of hot days and a decrease in the number of cold days. So the whole distribution shifts, and that's where you get the 1.5 or the 2 degrees centigrade. Doesn't sound very much, but it's huge. And you know that because we've had one of the hottest summers and the hottest autumns ever. So I would like people to talk about distributions rather than just talking about means, because it doesn't give you the whole picture about the devastating effects of climate change on our populations. So climate change and child health has been something that I've been worried about for 20 years and feeling increasingly anguished, as I said. And of course, children and old people, so at the extremes of age, are much more vulnerable to these changes than those of us in the middle year. Well, actually, I'm getting a bit old myself, but there you are. And the health effects are already happening. It's already quite clear. I don't know if we need any more evidence in terms of the climate, in terms of the fires, in terms of the floods, in terms of the air pollution in Sydney, which caused a huge rise in asthma in young kids. And the air pollution is something that is really happening globally and having a very major effect on children's health, their respiratory health in particular. And of course the Pacific Islands, who are having to cope with not only this increases in pollution, but the fact that they may disappear. It was interesting actually that preterm births, one thing that I'm very interested in, the birth weight predicts your whole chances of a good life, and preterm births actually fell during COVID because we had decreased air pollution and decreased carbon emissions during that time. But the reason why children, particularly young children, and older people are particularly vulnerable because of their underdeveloped immune systems. And really a little child is much more likely, much more vulnerable, and particularly those who have problems like low birth weight. They're much more likely to get infections, nutrition, and be thinking about food security in the future, exposures I've already mentioned, and things like asthma. And of course, pandemics. I mean, you might not know that dengue is actually marching south into Australia from our northern neighbours because of the change in climate. The fact is, as we move into more days over 35 and 40 degrees and so on, that increase, those young, small and very old and vulnerable people are going to, and we already have a lot of deaths from heat stroke. We wrote a paper to the MJA 10 years ago now on the number of heat stroke deaths after particular peaks in temperature, particularly in Melbourne. It's very social class dependent. So the wealthy people will be okay. They can go into their air-conditioned houses, or they can go to places which in fact aren't so affected. So the marginalised, the poor, and the First Nations in particular are going to be much more affected by these changes. They're being affected now. UNICEF put out a report card in 2022, the UNICEF report card number 17. I advise you to read it. They compared the environments for children. It was a different kind of UNICEF report than usual, and the information, the data, didn't depend on governments sending those data in, because Australia had actually sent data into the previous UNICEF report, but not enough to be ranked. We worried about that. So this data came independently of government, and they compared about 44 of the OECD countries, and Australia ranked 38 out of 44 as being an environment which was going to be not very healthy for children's health and well-being. They did some surveys within that report and found that 45% of Australian children, they looked at 7 countries, Australia, Spain, the UK, the US, etc. And 45% of our 15-year-olds are not going to have children because they're worried about climate change. So in addition to these direct health effects that are here now and are causing all the problems from infections and respiratory disease and lung damage and so on, there are the social, emotional and well-being effects on our children and young people. And I know everyone's blaming smartphones, and I do too. I think they're terrible. I have 3 grandchildren that are totally addicted to them. But what is really worrying for the future health and well-being of our children is the kind of environments that we're going to be creating for them. And that's where my anguish comes in. The environments are already less healthy. If you look at this UNICEF report, it's really scary about what we are not doing as a country and what we could have been doing. And I just want to end with a quote from Noel Nannup, who is a very revered elder here in Western Australia, a Noongar elder, and he just said, "The world is screaming and no one's taking any notice." Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And I'd like to introduce Josie Ellick again. I've already introduced her, but if everyone could give her another warm welcome. Thank you.
So yes, I am one of the founders of Save Our Songlines, and with my awesome niece, Raylene Cooper, who a lot of you know. Yeah, she's deadly. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about Save Our Songlines and where we're all at the moment is Save Our Songlines. We up in Karratha and Robe Murujuga. There's the Murujuga Aboriginal Corporation, and there was there's Woodside, there's the Rios, there's the Yarras, and this whole industrial hub on, as you all know, one of the world's most amazing museums of petroglyphs. These are our rock art, these are our stories, these are our dreaming. This is from our ancestors. This was given to us in a law that is beyond any law in this world right now. This was given to us from the stars. It was given to us from the water. It was given to us from our Mingalas, from our ancestral beings. They gave us a very complicated and intrinsic way of being and being able, our own technology, our own science, to be able to keep restoration of the environment, to keep longevity and sustainability, not only of human life, but all life on Earth. And this is what informs everything that we do. Everywhere we walk, this is our kinship system. Our kinship system doesn't only just belong to us as humans, we are connected to everything in that kinship system. Our totems, our songs, our ceremonies, our dances. So when we're going back to the rock art informs all of that. For each lineage to be able to create that sustainability, to be able to connect back to Mother Earth and be able to keep her alive, because she is a part of us and we're a part of her. And we're a part of everything that's around that. Nothing is separate in this world. We're all together. And what's happened over this time is that disruption and that disconnect from all of these companies that are coming in and just taking the resources out of Mother Earth. They are killing us all slowly. And we understand this because it's given to us. It is there in the rocks, in that very rock heart that they move, to be able to disconnect us from our stories and our songs. So they can go ahead and take whatever resource they want, make billions and billions and trillions of dollars out of it, while our kids have health problems. Not only my kids, your future generations, all of us together. Because if we can't survive, the natural world around us can't survive either. And that natural world around us are the very things that we're connected to when we walk. We go for a walk every day, maybe with your dog. You go for a walk you want to get out on holiday, and you go and see somebody else's country and you put your feet on their country. You are connecting to those songlines, which are songlines that are all around the world. They start here and they end here. Well, they don't end, they actually just keep going and going and going, because they're a continuous source of information, just like my culture has been and has been for millennia. The creation stories that sit in that place, especially Murujuga, are they are second to none. Once that is gone and those songlines are broken, we are broken. The sun, the stars, the moon, the earth, the water, the seawater, the animals, the plants, everything that sustains our life is broken and disrupted. And now here we are, standing here today, having to come and try and tell everybody we're a minority of people in this world. If you think about how many people are here, to be able to bring our stories back out now, to be able to save our songlines and save our information that's going to keep us all sustained and give us longevity of life. And that was the teaching from my old people, where my old people, when I came back, I mean, I was the stolen generation. And when I came back to my mum, I was very lucky to have 11 years with her. So I got a little bit of knowledge. But then when the rocks start calling you, and that place starts calling you because it's dying, and we don't want it to die, they don't want it to die. Our ancestors didn't put us here to let somebody else's creation and thoughts come in and disrupt our lines for all humanity. And by taking those resources out, by removing rocks, you know, those rock art that are out there, they tell stories. They're not just scribbles on rocks, as some people might think they are. But unfortunately, a lot of people like that don't know about connection to country, don't know about connection to their own self and to their own, you know, when they wake up every morning, they've got to put their feet on the ground as well. And that connection that runs through them for Mother Earth. And that's that connection we feel, and especially being traditional owners of a country that is so special like that, with over 1 million petroglyphs. Every time they touch something, every time they move something, it hurts us first. We feel it in our DNA because our kinship system is connected to that. Firstly, we were given the dances and we were given the songs to be able to sustain that. So, knowing all of this information, there's a couple of certain people in this room today that actually came and helped us when we first started back in 2021, after doing the practices that we do as women. We had no idea in Crawford that, even through the Aboriginal Corporation, that this huge big Scarborough gas project was going to go ahead. And Ray was even on the board of Murujuga. And she'd never seen an EPA come over the table. She'd never seen or had a yarn with anybody or a meeting with anyone from Woodside or anything about these huge big projects that they've just gone and done. And unfortunately, our old people from our elder circle were hoodwinked. They signed off on things that they didn't understand they were signing off on. They were giving away a whole country, sacred country, that they had no idea that they were giving away. Because this is what the mining companies do to Aboriginal people. They misinform you, and then they wear you down over years and years and years, because they've got the time, and they've already done their timelines. So by the time old fella here is, 10 years' time, they might not be around. So we'll come back and have another bite then, and maybe these younger people will be there, they might say yes. Or we'll just put them in a room with each other, and we'll just wear them down all day with all this amazing information that they have on these projects. They don't understand what they're saying. So they go to sleep, because they're old. They have a sleep. They wake up, it's like, oh, yep, I'll sign this piece of paper, you can get paid tomorrow. They just sign the paper and go home, because they need some money for their families. This is what they do to us. They're still doing it today. They're still giving us misinformation about our own country. They're not even giving us the information. Sometimes, most of the time, there's no truth here when it comes to the way that they work with Aboriginal people and traditional owners. And so we created a campaign called Save Our Songlines, because that's all we could do, and go against our own mob, go against our own corporation, and realise we have a powerful voice, especially as women from that country, to be able to sustain and nurture our nurturing and our way of being as women, and our especially cultural women. And being able to have that voice against a huge, big company like Woodside. We went to Geneva, we got there, we had some people help us along the way, some pretty amazing people. Like I said, there's some sitting right here in this room that helped us on that journey. Sometimes it's really hard to sustain that when you're working in that space. So for me, and you don't get paid for it, so you're still trying to struggle and you're still trying to save your country, but you don't have any funds, you don't have anything. So sometimes you just got to make a split. So I went to the Australian Conservation Foundation, and Ray is still fighting that fight. We still talk, we still get her up to come and do things, because go to ACF and being able to create something that's bigger than I am, and to be in a place that's bigger than I am, just locked in my little town, I had no idea until we actually got out that this is happening around the whole of Australia. We are being attacked. And our songline goes all the way around Australia. Now they're attacking the Kimberleys as well. That's our neighbours. That's our family too. We have a kinship system that goes all the way around. So when they attack one country and they attack our country, they attack the country over in Warrnambool, over in Gladstone, anywhere they want to attack it, Groote Island, all of those songlines are connected. And so they are actually attacking us as all humans. And the First Nations people are the first ones, because we're the ones that feel it. So this is the reasoning why we all have to stand up. We all have to get behind all of these campaigns that are going on. We definitely have to stop Scarborough Gas going ahead. If we don't stop it, it's going to be really hard for us and for our kids. We already know the health problems, right? They're already there. And I've probably spoken for a long time, but so I'm going to wrap it up by saying, basically, there has to be a better way forward. There has to be. But also, I know something else. We've got kids coming behind us. And that's our future. And they think they're going to mess with our future. I think our kids have got something to say for that, because they're going to have to come up against them. And I don't think they're going to be quite as a little bit unruly, but as we are. But I think they're going to have a big fight on their hands, and I'll be happy for that, because I'm going to G my grandkids up for it for sure. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Josie. And, I obviously, as a non-Aboriginal person, don't have that amazing connection that Josie has. But just in terms of, this is one of the most important artworks and cultural sites in the world, and to me it's just staggering that they could put an industrial park over it and destroy these works that are 10 times the age of Stonehenge and 5 times the age of the pyramids, and utterly exquisite. So anyway, so it's just, I'm staggered by that treatment of such an important part of global culture, not to mention to Indigenous culture. Next I'd like to introduce Alex Hillman, and Alex is an amazing guy because he worked at Woodside for many years. He's actually their climate advisor there, and now he does great work with the Australian Centre for Corporate Responsibility, ACCR, and so it's a great pleasure to ask him to speak tonight. Thank you, Alex.
There we go. So I've been called a number of things for working for Woodside. An amazing guy isn't one of them, but thank you very much. I was overhearing Richard have a chat to a few people beforehand, and one thing he said which really struck me was to convince people you don't need facts and figures. So next thing I do is apologise, because I'm an engineer and a finance analyst, and I'm just about to show you about 8 graphs. So hopefully you can bear with me though. So ACCR, what we do is we engage with shareholders to talk to companies, to engage with institutional shareholders about the companies they own, trying to influence climate change outcomes and reduce real-world emissions. So we spend a lot of time talking about Woodside and to Woodside's investors. And if people don't know, like Woodside, it's a massive domestic name in WA, but it's also it's now a very, very large global company. So it's one of, by their definition, one of the world's 10 largest global energy companies. So it really does have a global scale when we start talking about Woodside. So Woodside, Josie was talking about a project, and Burrup Hub came up as well. You know, that's a Woodside project up in Karratha. The biggest chunk of that project is a gas field, or a series of gas fields called Browse. So at ACCR, we did a fairly deep dive into the economics of Browse. And what we found is it's an extremely expensive project. So that bar on the right is how much it would cost to build Browse, so over $40 billion. And then the bit on the left is how much money, if everything goes to plan, Woodside and its partners would make. So, you know, if something goes just a little bit wrong, then Browse would actually lose money based off our analysis. So when we, you know, a lot of the times people go, well, health or the environment or cultural heritage or money, you know, when these trade-offs, everyone assumes that if these companies are doing things, then they're making money. You know, this shows the business case for Browse at least is quite fragile, and I think that assumption that these companies are going to profit out of this is at times on quite shaky ground. So, proof in point, Australia for a little while, you know, I think we're now the 3rd largest LNG exporter. For a little while we were the world's largest LNG exporter for a couple of years. And that was built on the back of 8 LNG projects, which were built since 2012 or so. So every single one of those projects was delivered late, and every single one of those projects was over budget. So on average, they were 35% over their budget, and 7 of those 8 have lost money. So Browse is a bit of a shaky business case. When we look retrospectively, you know, Australia's LNG industry has actually just eroded money for its shareholders. I know we're here largely because of a report that the Australia Institute has put out. You know, we've crunched some of our own numbers on tax. You know, globally, the oil and gas sector does pay a huge amount of money. On average, it pays 44% of revenue as tax. So Woodside started paying a bit of tax, or a bit more tax last year, but it's still paying, on average over the last 5 years, 75% less tax than its peers, than its global peers. So that's about half the value of the company. So if it had have paid that 44%, the same as the rest of its peers, like it would have been half the size of the company. So it's not just the Australian taxpayers that are missing out of here. It's largely because this company is making a lot less money than people expect. Some of the things we hear about why we need gas is that gas is going to displace coal. So, you know, Woodside talks about this all the time. The International Energy Agency, so the world's premier energy forecasting agency, put out this graph in October and November last year looking at what they expect to happen to the Chinese electricity mix. So China is the world's biggest emitter. Its electricity grid, or grids, you know, collectively are the world's biggest electricity grid and the world's biggest user of coal. And so that brown line along the top is how much coal the IEA expects to use, but it'll get used by the Chinese electricity system. And what you see is around 2024, it peaks and it starts dropping quite steeply. So if the gas industry that are telling you that coal is going to get displaced by gas was right, then that purple line along the bottom would be going up, but it's not. So Chinese coal is likely to start decreasing. It's likely to start decreasing quite quickly, and none of that is going to be replaced by gas. What it's actually going to replace by is a bit of nuclear, a lot of renewables, and a fair bit of energy efficiency. So that's what we need to displace coal and to dramatically reduce emissions in the short term. This graph shows the outlook for gas. So the one on the left, again, this is International Energy Agency data. The one on the left says their projection of gas use into the future and how that's changed over time. So every year since 2019, their expectation of how much gas we're going to use in the future has decreased. And then the one on the right is liquefied natural gas. So this is what Woodside's particularly good at. It's getting gas, it's cooling it down to so cold it becomes a liquid, putting it on a ship. What they're showing there is those two purple bars. So that's existing LNG facilities operating today. And then the dark purple is facilities being built at the moment. What that shows is we don't need any more new facilities for any one of those scenarios until at least 2040. And in fact, that NZE, that green line down the bottom, so that's the 1.5 degree scenario that the IEA put out, that says even the facilities we're building now, we don't need. Like if we just stopped construction of these facilities and we end up with a 1.5 degree world, then none of those facilities are going to be needed. Like there's a really dramatic oversupply of LNG coming. Another thing we hear about these companies, oil and gas companies, is we need them for the transition. They have deep pockets and lots of capital. They're really good at building projects. They understand the energy system. All these sort of things are bandied around. What we got here is a graph of how much money is being spent on fossil fuels versus clean energy. So on the left, so you can see since 2016, every year, and by an increasing amount, there's more money going towards renewable energy and EVs and so on than there is going to fossil fuels. So already the world it's not shifting fast enough, it's not shifting enough money, but it's already providing more capital to the solutions for climate change than the problems of climate change. And then the graph on the right shows how much of that money is coming from oil and gas companies. So that $5.5 trillion on the left, 1% of that came from oil and gas companies. So I'm not saying we have enough money to fix climate change, but I'm saying we actually don't, it doesn't look like we need oil and gas money to fix climate change. So lastly, a couple of slides about Woodside's investors. So what we do is we spend a lot of time speaking to Woodside's investors. And there's this thing in the world, in the financial system, where companies are encouraged, sometimes quite forcefully, to put out a climate change plan and to allow a vote on that plan. It's a non-binding vote, but it's an advisory vote on that plan at the AGM, Annual General Meeting. And so there's been a couple of hundred of these things. We scoured the internet, we pulled a whole heap of these together, and Woodside in 2022 had the world's worst vote on a climate change plan of these, dozens of votes around the world. And then earlier this year, they beat their own record. So it's the first time under the Say on Climate mechanism that a company's shareholders have told a company that they actually reject their climate change plan. And this is mainstream investors. This is not mums and dads. This is Australia's largest superannuation fund. It's some of the US's biggest pension funds. Like it's major institutional investors are telling Woodside, look, go back, try again. You need a better climate change plan. And then this, I think it's my last slide, is the votes on directors. So the Say on Climate votes are non-binding. It's a feedback opportunity. But a director vote is binding. So if a director at an annual general meeting for a company doesn't get 50% of the votes, at the end of that meeting, they're no longer a director. So the significance of these votes is much, much more important than the Say on Climate votes. And what you're seeing, so those green bars are the range of votes for directors being re-elected each year. So we've gone as far back as the Australian Stock Exchange stores information on the internet. And we pulled that all out and we had a look at it. And apart from one guy in 2015 and 2021, no one's got more than like 5% vote against them until 2023. So in 2023, Woodside had just received the world's worst Say on Climate vote, and they came back with a climate plan and they said, we haven't really changed our mind very much, so we're basically representing the same climate change plan. And that's when you saw the 35% vote against a director, which is unprecedented on the ASX on a climate change issue, and it's just off the charts in Woodside. The little circles are where the director votes are for the chair. So, on the board, there's one of the directors is the chair. And you can see just this year, Mr. Goyder had, I think it was 18% vote against him. So, it's not as significant as the 35% vote against Mr. McFarlane the year before. But again, you compare that to all the circles over the last 20 years, and it's by far the worst vote for a Woodside chair. that has happened. So, Woodside's pushing this agenda that they're going to deliver value, but these companies often lose money building these projects, and even their investors are starting to see through this and asking them to come back with a better plan.
Thanks, Alex. And finally, I'd just like to ask Richard to come up and speak. Richard's the Executive Director of the Australia Institute and a very prominent economist and commentator in Australia. And he's, I think, single-handedly made economics entertaining. And I think that's an enormous achievement. So I'd like everyone to welcome Richard. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, funniest economist. It's a low bar, right? So, not a bad one to jump over. Look, thank you all for coming along tonight and for speaking tonight. It's just wonderful to be back in Perth and seeing how many people are so committed for so many different but united reasons to tackling the problems we face. Just look up at the beautiful room we're in tonight. While I was sitting up here listening, I thought, what a beautiful building. I wonder how old it is. It's 150 years old. 150 years old. And then I thought, I wonder how long the Northwest Shelf's been around. Not so long, about 40 years. And you know what? At absolute best, we'll be still sucking gas out of the ground, or at worst, depending on your perspective. 40, 50 years. This building will still be here. The gas industry are a blip, an absolute blip when you think about the deep time that Indigenous people have been caring for their country. And what's the gas industry going to do? It's just going to suck some gas out of the ground for less than a century and possibly heat the planet for 1,000 years. And I tell you, after they're gone, this building will still be here. But this building's new in the context of what we've been hearing about tonight. So I know it's a strange place for an economist to start, but we've got to get all this into perspective. We've got to get all this into perspective. What the hell are we doing and why are we doing it? Now, the main reason we're told that we're doing all this gas exploration so we can do all this gas extraction so we can cause all this climate change is because if it wasn't for all the gas, no one would have any jobs. Well, thanks to Mark, that's bullshit. And it's not just thanks to Mark, it's all this, by the way, all the information Mark put up tonight, it's hid on this top secret thing called the internet. And it's pulled together by some pinko lefties at something called the Australian Bureau of Statistics. All right, so, you do your own research, please. But the ABS has done plenty. 0.5% of Australians working in an industry. 0.5%. Oh, okay, but it's not about the jobs. Oh, it's not about the jobs, Rich. It's about all the tax that they don't pay. and it's this pea and thimble trick, right? Oh, sure, we don't pay the royalties, but we pay the PRRT. Okay, maybe we didn't pay the PRRT, but we pay the company tax. Nope, 3 strikes and you're out. Yes, there's royalties that, as Mark said, again, there's this pinko lefty organisation called the Australian Tax Office. Again, and if you've heard of this internet thing, check it out. You can find all the data there, it's hidden on their website. According to the Tax Office, Exxon, plucky little American startup, has never paid a cent in company tax in Australia. Never paid a cent. Chevron paid $30 a couple of years ago and it topped the charts. Oh, but it's not about that, Richard, it's about the royalties. No, that's what our latest research is showing. 73% of the gas they're exporting, no royalties, none, nada, zip, not complicated, none. And here we are getting told how essential they are, how we can't live without them when they're the ones literally destroying literally destroying the world's oldest art gallery, trying to destroy a culture, literally destroying our climate. It's not for the jobs, and it's not for the tax. So what's it for? Now, Mark said at the beginning, there's no doubt the gas industry have incredible power in Western Australia. As someone that doesn't come from here, I can't profess to understand what it is, what hold, what sway they have. But the one thing they can't do is vote. They can't vote in an election. And they're actually terrified. They're really scared. That's why they waste so much shareholders' money on all these ads lying about the jobs and lying about the tax. They're worried people are going to figure it out. They're worried that people are going to figure out, hang on, we get the destruction, we get the damage to the environment in the short term, we get the loss of Indigenous heritage, we get the climate change, and we get no, we don't even get the tax. Now, it's not inevitable that we're going to fix this, but it's not inevitable they're going to keep getting away with this. They don't get away with it in Saudi Arabia, where they pay heaps of tax. They don't get away with it in Qatar, where they pay heaps of tax. They don't get away with it in Norway, where they pay heaps of tax. This is a uniquely Australian phenomena. We're literally giving tax away to companies who are then selling it and making a fortune with your gas. Now, we're not going to fix it tonight. We're not going to leave here and change this tonight. But the only way we're ever going to change it is if we start actually looking at this bizarre situation and feeling the confidence to speak out about it, feeling the confidence to say, well, what's in it for us? Feeling the confidence to say, as Premier said on radio this morning in response to the shocking revelations that, according to top secret tax office data, most of the gas pays no royalties. The Premier said, well, I'd like to collect more revenue. Well, just shut up there, mate. Just end the sentence. But he went on to say, but I'd like to collect more revenue, but I don't want to make the gas industry mad at me. That's what he said. Might be slightly decoding him there. Well, guess what? He's got to be more afraid of you than he is of them. Because you get to vote and the gas industry don't. And according to our estimates, the research we put out today, if we just applied the average level of royalties to the tax that they're paying nothing for, we collect $9.6 billion a year in extra revenue. $9.6 billion a year in extra revenue. Now, we don't have to all agree on what to spend that on, but I reckon that'd pay for a few teachers, a few nurses. I reckon it'd set up quite a number of centres for women fleeing domestic violence. I reckon we could do a fair bit of tackling climate change. $9.6 billion a year in free gas. But until our body politic can come together and shake this parasite off, it's going to keep taking the gas. It's going to keep causing the harm until we get around to doing something about it. So, as Fiona said, I'm worried about climate change. I'm terrified about, what in 100 years when this building's still here, I don't know what our climate's going to look like. But we know what's going to happen if we don't do something about fossil fuel expansion. And here we are in 2024, still opening new gas projects, still opening new coal mines, still approving them, still subsidising them. Now, Mark said I was going to be entertaining, and I fear I've let you down. But I'm about to change the pace for you. There's so much upside here. The scare campaign from the gas industry, stick with me, this is terrifying. You know what they're threatening? They're threatening that if we make them pay a shit ton of tax, they won't invest anymore. I mean, is that the worst threat in the world? If you make me pay all the tax you want, I'll stop doing the thing you hate. Okay. Sign me up for that. Literally, the gas industry's threat to your Premier is if we start making them pay more tax, they might not invest in more projects that will ruin the world. Who gets to think that's a threat? I wish they would promise to do that. But that's up to us. That's up to us to reconceptualise this, because somehow they've managed to convince not you, you're too smart, but that person sitting next to you seems to have fallen for some of this nonsense. Okay, it's not the person sitting next to you, it's the one next to them. But someone must be believing this nonsense. But it's literally that, okay? We know that most people don't work there. We know they don't pay much tax. And we now know, here's the secret. This is the good news. We now know if we make them pay some tax, they'll stop doing us harm. This is the best deal in the world. You need to grab it. You need to focus on those opportunities, because not only can we spend all that sweet, juicy tax in the short term, we get rid of the parasite in the long term. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. Now, because we've all spoken a bit too long, we're going to have to skip the questions bit, which is a shame. But on the positive side, we've got Lucy Peach performing for us tonight, and so I'm going to invite Lucy out to play a few songs. So give Lucy a.
Special announcement. I promised to do something. There's a few people here that are thinking about organising campaigns at the next election, mainly around independence in the state and federal election, and they're going to be hanging out near the doors on the way out. So if you want to introduce yourself, maybe find a community independent project to get behind, keep an eye out for them. But no matter who you want to vote for at the next election, if you care about climate change, put the pressure on the candidates.
And I might just, since we're talking about a few of these things now, the Australian Institute has some merch, and it's out in the foyer downstairs, and it's free. And it's little postcards that you can leave in cafes, give to friends, give to people you've never met before, send to your local MP, and they look very similar to the enormous billboards we've got around Perth at the moment. So grab a whole handful of them and make really great use of them. And we also have some reports, some of our most recent reports, and feel free to grab one, but just there's a limited amount, so grab one if you can, if you're really keen to read it or you want to pass it on to someone who you think should read it. Thanks very much. So I'll just maybe if you guys can go down to sit in the audience and enjoy Lucy Peach performing. Thanks very much.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.